Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to Utility Sports with another 2022 NBA mock draft. I know how much you guys have been loving these. The views on them have been absolutely incredible. So let's keep that good energy rolling forward. Smash that like button in today's video and also subscribe to the channel. It'd be greatly appreciated. I put so much time and effort into these, not only just actually setting up the video, recording it, making all the graphics, the thumbnail, editing the video, and setting everything into actually YouTube. But on top of it, I have to watch all these prospects, prepare what I'm going to say about them, and really just put a lot of work into every little tiny aspect that goes unseen. So I do really hope that you've been enjoying them. A lot of work goes into it. And again, it just takes 1 second of your time to hit the like button and also subscribe. It would go a long way in showing your appreciation for the content on the channel. I have been fighting a cold over the last week and a half or so. So it's been kind of challenging recording videos. I know it sounds like a first world problem there, but it has just been a little bit of a struggle for me with my throat. You can probably hear it actually right now as I'm speaking, but I've been pushing through for you guys. So push through for me, hit that like button, and also sub to the channel. If you are new, that would be greatly appreciated. And now with that spiel all over, let's jump into the first pick, the Orlando Magic, the team that landed the #1 overall selection through the NBA draft lottery. And boy, oh boy, were they in need of it. This team just lacked the true superstar, the guy that you look at and say he's a problem. And for me with Orlando, this is a great opportunity in a really, really talented draft class. It's very deep. There's a lot of talent in here, and they get their and they get their choice, the cream of the crop here for Orlando. First overall, I think it's going to be a really great opportunity and one that they're not going to pass on here. They're going to take Chet Holmgren out of Gonzaga. I know already a lot of people are probably groaning. I know a lot of people do not want Chet Holmgren, but I'm telling you right now, a lot of draft experts, a lot of evaluators, including myself, are very high on this kid. He's not #1 on my board, but he's #2. And I think it's really well deserved that he could be the first overall pick. Think about right now in your head, count the number of 7-footers who can shoot 39% from three in the league. Okay, very small number. Now think about the amount of 7-footers that can dribble the basketball up the floor in the league. Again, a very small number. Think about the 7-footers who can switch out onto the perimeter, hedge a screen, recover to the rim, and get a block shot as a chase down guy. Again, not a ton of 7-footers who can consistently do that. Chet Holmgren does all of those things. I know a lot of people are afraid that maybe he's going to get bullied. Okay, play him at power forward. A lot of people thought the same thing about Evan Mobley last year. He played the power forward next to Jared Allen and was phenomenal his rookie season. Chet Holmgren, maybe it's 2-3 years before we see him at center. Okay, he's going to be a really good power forward. And luckily, Orlando has Wendell Carter Jr. already. You have two tantalizing big men who can step out to the three-point line, knock it down. Really intriguing high-low game. Oh, and by the way, Jalen Suggs and Chet Holmgren were high school teammates. It just makes too much sense here. Chet Holmgren goes first overall to Orlando, and I feel like this is starting to cement itself as reality. #2, the Oklahoma City Thunder here now. And I think there's a real divide here between 1 and 2. Who's going to go first overall? Some people are really still believe Jabari Smith's the guy, but I think ultimately we're in a situation where everyone's starting to realize that 1 and 2 are Holmgren and Jabari Smith in this class when it comes to the draft order, the way that they're actually going to get selected. I think a lot of people expect them to be the first 2 selections. Some people think it could be either order. Some people are, like myself, are starting to think Holmgren 1, Jabari Smith 2, and we're not going to switch up from that here. Jabari Smith goes 2nd overall to OKC. He goes from those Auburn colors to the Oklahoma City colors, very similar, so he's not going to have to trade out too much of his gear, and it's going to be a pretty good look for him. I think Oklahoma City is way better than a lot of people are expecting. If they don't shut down Shai Gilgeous-Alexander at the end of every season and Josh Giddey, they probably win upwards of 30 to 35 games. So adding Jabari Smith in here, maybe we could see this team sneak near the play-in. Not sure if they're going to get there, but they're going to be closer than a lot of people expect, and I think they're going to be in a really good spot after drafting Jabari Smith. Pick 3, Houston Rockets here now. And kind of how I said that the 1 and 2 were cemented, I think 3 starting to cement itself as well. They're going to take one of the forwards, whether that's Holmgren, Banchero, or Jabari Smith. And of course, we know at this point, the player who has fallen to them is Paolo Banchero, and I use the word fallen intentionally there. Paolo Banchero in a lot of classes would have been the first overall pick, or at worst the second overall pick. This class is very unique. There's a ton of top-end talent. There's a ton of depth talent. There's a lot of talent, period. And Paolo Banchero going third overall is a steal, which I know it sounds counterintuitive. Usually steals aren't third overall. This feels like a steal to me. Paolo Banchero, a great mid-range game. He's improving as a playmaker. He's been able to operate inside and out. If his three-point game and defense comes around, specifically in terms of consistency, watch out. Very possible he could be the best player in the class. Probably going to win Rookie of the Year. If I had to bet, I would put money on him winning Rookie of the Year. Out of all the players in this class, I think he's the most NBA-ready talent at this point. And I think here he goes into Houston, and you have a really intriguing trio of offensive players between Jalen Green, Paolo Banchero, and Kevin Porter Jr., probably in that order. Sacramento Kings here now picking fourth. Of course, another team that is considered a big winner from the NBA draft lottery. They moved up all the way to 4. That number 7 spot definitely has some luck attached to it in Adam Silver's NBA. And with the 4th overall pick, I have the Sacramento Kings taking Shaedon Sharpe out of Kentucky. And this is a little bit of a switch up. You see him going above Jaden Ivey here in my mock. Shaedon Sharpe, after his pro day, where he looked really, really good, really fluid with the ball, was knocking down moving jump shots, he cemented himself as a top 5 pick for me. And I think realistically, Sacramento, after just moving away from Tyrese Halliburton with their kind of flurry of guards, they would prefer a little bit of a bigger player. Shaedon Sharpe, about 6'6", not massive, but he's bigger than Jaden Ivey, and I think fits more naturally into more of a wing position, whether that's the 2 or 3. Realistically, he's probably a 2, but ultimately there's not much of a difference there. I think he's gonna be able to guard 2s and 3s with his athleticism. And Sacramento's gonna try and build around the core of Davion Mitchell, De'Aaron Fox, Domantas Sabonis, Harrison Barnes, Shaedon Sharpe. That's a pretty formidable starting 5. Now, is it enough to get to the playoffs? I don't know, but Shaedon Sharpe definitely a good addition here for the Sacramento Kings. At 5 now, we got the Detroit Pistons here, and for Detroit, obviously this is the dream scenario here. They fell down to 5, but the player they would have maybe taken at 3 or 4 is still here for them at pick 5, and that is, of course, Jaden Ivey. His father played for grandfather, played for the Detroit Lions, and it just feels right to see him playing for the Pistons here down the road. He is someone who I think is a phenomenal fit next to Cade Cunningham. Cunningham's so calculated, good with using his own pace of play. He never feels rushed, makes all the right decisions, has great size to him. And then you get this ball of energy in Jaden Ivey, who's going to tear the rim off the backboard, who's going to push in transition, who is going to have a flair for the dramatic. He's got the big ego in a good way. He's got the I'm a star mentality, which I think Detroit really needs that next to Cade Cunningham. This is a perfect pairing. For anyone who's been watching the channel, you know that Jaden Ivey's number 1 on my board. I love Jaden Ivey as a prospect. I think putting him next to Cade Cunningham maybe limits his upside a little bit as someone who I think can create for others at a high level down the road. I don't think he can necessarily do that right now. I think it's going to take 2 or 3 years for him to grow into what he's going to fully become. But ultimately, I think he's a really great prospect, and Detroit gets a very talented all-around player here who can put the ball in the hole, can put it on the deck, and can facilitate to others when the floor is open for him. Pick 6, we've got the Indiana Pacers here now, and Indiana definitely a team that wanted to move up. Not very often we see them in the top 10 here. Last time they had a top 10 pick, they took Paul George out of Fresno State. So now at 6, you have to ask yourself, where could this team go after a big Domantas Sabonis trade that really has swung the future of Indiana basketball? And I see them looking at Benedict Mathurin here out of Arizona. He's a very talented prospect, another player that I absolutely love. He's another sophomore, just like Jaden Ivey. And I have a similar interest in him as a player because of how athletic he is, but he's also able to create from deep, specifically off the bounce. He's very good with the basketball in his hands. I think he's a better player than Chris Duarte, who actually was fairly impressive this year for Indiana. I know that the Pacers caught some flack for that based on his age when they drafted him. Mathurin, though, solid player, not old and at all really for his class. He's actually fairly young for being a sophomore. And I think his all-around talent, his elevation, his jump shot, his ability to defend multiple positions, I think he's going to be a good gap defender. He's got great athleticism, very fluid in transition, and he's pretty good with the ball in his hands. I think if he buys into playing as a cutter a little bit more frequently, he could be really good in that regard as well, off of Tyrese Halliburton. And I think Mathurin here is maybe one of the dream outcomes for Indiana at pick 6. Again, a really talented player who I've liked the entire process. Pick 7, Portland, another team that really wanted to move up. And you have to understand why, right? Damian Lillard, they're trying to win with him. It's not easy to go from a team that had the 6th best lottery odds to all of a sudden trying to win a championship in the time frame of a 30-plus-year-old point guard, who, by the way, has not ever been a part of a great defensive team. That's going to be very tough to do. They need to build a defensive identity. They need to get way better on that end of the floor. And for that reason, I'm mocking Keegan Murray, who is a great positional defender, not necessarily just guarding his own position, but also when it comes to help side. He's always in the right position. He knows where to be on the floor. He's got great defensive IQ, and that IQ actually translates to the offensive end of the floor as well. His pro day was fairly impressive, showcased his athleticism, his ability to work off the baseline, which I think is where we're going to see him the most often, his first year in the league. And I think Keegan Murray is one of those rare prospects that if you are looking to take a step forward and start winning, again, we've had multiple sophomores go in a row here. We went from drafting a high school senior to 3 straight sophomores from 4 through 7. And it's definitely interesting seeing Keegan Murray here now at this spot because, again, Portland, there's a lot of pressure on them. New GM Joe Cronin, they want to win, and I think Keegan Murray actually does help them do that. Number 8 now, New Orleans, the Pelicans here, and a team that's already starting to win. Herb Jones, what a great pick last year. Trey Murphy, I think he's going to have a nice sophomore season. And you're looking at a team that once they get Zion Williamson back, could be scary hours. They've got a lot of talented players who can do a lot of different things. The CJ McCollum trade worked out so beautifully for them. Sorry, Blazers fans, if you're still here at this point of the video. But, you know, David Griffin took a lot of risks. They panned out. And New Orleans is in a really great spot here with the 8th overall pick. And they have them looking at Jalen Duren out of Memphis. And I know Pelicans fans are going to say, oh, we don't necessarily need a center. We got Valanciunas. Right, but you don't need a forward. You got Herb Jones, Trey Murphy, Brandon Ingram. You don't really need a guard at this point because you've got CJ McCollum, Zion Williamson offensively basically plays as a point guard. You also have Jose Alvarado. There's not a lot of needs here for New Orleans. So why not go upside? And I think Jalen Duren has massive upside. He's actually 5th on my board as we currently speak. Again, I'm going to reevaluate every player and make sure my big board is ready by the draft for the way that I want it to be down in history, right? So we can look back at it and maybe not go, oh my goodness, was this bad? But as of right now, I feel pretty good about him 5th because I think long-term, you look at his projectable upside, he's very good out in space. Again, he's a very switchable big. He's not quite as big in terms of his actual size in comparison to like a Mark Williams or Walker Kessler, but he is way better laterally than those players. He's got great second jump capability. He's actually very coordinated, can catch the ball with either his left or right hand, one-handed, and finish lobs, which is actually an underrated skill that not a lot of bigs actually have. And I think he's perfect here in New Orleans. Give him some time to develop. This team's going to be good anyway without him. And if he ends up hitting, oh my goodness, once Valanciunas' contract's up, no worries, slot Duren in. This team becomes very, very athletic, very, very dangerous, and a lot of fun to watch. Number 9 now, San Antonio here, and a team that's really set Duren's off the board. They would have loved to scoop him up on draft night. But now at this spot, they turn their eyes to a Duke product, AJ Griffin, son of former NBA player Adrian Griffin, who's actually a coach right now for the Toronto Raptors. His name has come up in some head coach interviews as well. And AJ Griffin's a very smart, intellectual player, and you can tell his dad played in the league based on how he plays the game. He's got a very pro-style game already, specifically as someone who can really knock down the three-point shot. And I think it's most evident when you watch his escape dribble. He has the best escape dribble in the class as we currently speak, utilized it a ton this past year at Duke. He is very refined when it comes to shooting the basketball. He's got really good stroke, great mechanics, and also is someone who, again, with that escape dribble, can find lateral space to get shots off. It's not surprising he shot such a high percentage from 3 at Duke. That's going to translate very well to the NBA. AJ Griffin feels like a player who, if this was a different class, maybe would have gone in the top 5. Spurs get him here at 9. Now he has to live into some of the defensive traits that you want to see from him. He's got the physical aspect of it. It's just about putting together all the technical standpoints, but I think he's going to get there, and I think San Antonio is getting a really nice young prospect in AJ Griffin. Moving into pick 10 now, we've got the Washington Wizards here. And for me with Washington, there's a few things I could consider. Also, I have an offseason preview that just came out the other day for the Wizards, so make sure to go check that out if you are a Wizards fan. I'll try and put a card for it here. But ultimately for Washington, I landed on Dyson Daniels, who I talked about in that offseason preview for a decent amount of time, specifically because when you look at Washington, the hunt for a point guard has been so real. Since John Wall tore his Achilles, that question has been unanswered. They tried Russell Westbrook. Didn't work out necessarily the way that maybe a lot of people would have loved to have it work out. Even though I think Russ is really respected by Washington fans, ultimately it didn't lead to the winning that they had hoped it could become. Spencer Dinwiddie was a disaster there. And now maybe Dyson Daniels could be the guy. And I think his defensive upside, his multi-positional capabilities on that end of the floor could be very helpful next to Bradley Beal. And the aspect too that Kyle Kuzma took steps forward. The Kristaps acquisition limits what else you need from Dyson Daniels offensively. He can just be a facilitator. And his pro day did give a lot of hope that maybe he can grow as a three-point shooter. He did look good in his pro day. The one thing I'm going to say though, almost every single prospect does look good in their pro day. It's hard to be an NBA draft prospect and not look good playing basketball 1-on-0. I'm just going to leave it at that. Doesn't necessarily swing my thoughts on Dyson Daniels, but I think he does make sense as a landing spot here for Washington because, again, Washington really badly needs a point guard. He's got good size, defensive versatility. He's got a lot of things people are looking for. It really comes down to whether you see him as a Marcus Smart type or as a Frank Ntilikina type. I think those are the two players that are going to be his ceiling and floor in a lot of ways. And I'm leaning more toward the floor with him myself, but I know a lot of people really do like this kid. I'm hoping he ends up getting closer to that ceiling. That would be awesome for him. Again, I don't want any of these prospects to not do well, but I am giving my honest thoughts on them as well as we go through this process. But Washington, definitely going to be a landing spot for him on the draft night. Pick 11, New York Knicks now here in a team that maybe would have considered Dyson Daniels themselves had he been here, but of course he's not. So they go with Johnny Davis out of Wisconsin, a player who I felt like was a lock to be a top 7 pick 3-4 months ago. So what really happened here? Well, first of all, he ended the season in college really poorly with a terrible night from the field in his final collegiate game. That definitely swings some things. But then other players tend to go up throughout the process. We've seen guys like, again, Dyson Daniels climb. Jeremy Sohan's climbing. Mark Williams is climbing. And Johnny Davis, who ended on kind of a rougher patch of grass and, maybe hasn't gone up the board, doesn't necessarily mean he's just necessarily falling because of anything he's done, but also other players could be just perhaps surpassing him. I don't think he's going to fall too far, though. I think he's a lock to be a lottery pick, and New York gets a really nice, talented combo guard here who can do stuff with the ball in his hands. And if his three-point shooting as a catch-and-shoot guy translates better than I'm expecting it to, could be maybe even an intriguing off-ball player, but I think that's going to take a little bit of time for him. Pick 12, Oklahoma City Thunder here now at this spot. And for me with the Thunder, there's a few different things to consider. Remember, we went with Jabari Smith, 2nd overall. So now, how does Sam Presti come back from that? What does he look to add at this spot of the draft? And for me, I'm going Mark Williams, a player who, again, I just mentioned him as a climber. Why is he a climber? Well, he measured in at the combine with a 7'2" height, which is huge. He measured in with a 9'9" standing reach, which is the tallest in the class. Again, huge. That means he's only 3 inches away from dunking the basketball without jumping, which is insane. He's a good athlete, somewhat switchable, also going to be pretty solid in drop coverage, which is pretty good. The fact that he's a solid hybrid center who can do a little bit of both is a positive here for him. And then you also have to look at his ability on offense, where he's going to run the floor hard. He's going to do all the little things you ask him to do. He's going to set nice screens. Oh, and by the way, he's a good lob catcher as well. This is like the full package here. And for Oklahoma City, I talked about this team being ready to take a step forward. If you add a really good screen setter, it's going to open up the floor so much for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Josh Giddey and it's going to make life way easier. Not only adding Jabari Smith, who's one of the better shooters, if not the best shooter in this class, but then you add Mark Williams with him. The front court went from bad to very, very good and intriguing rather quickly in one night, which I think is a really good outcome for Oklahoma City. Oh, and by the way, they have pick 30 as well in this draft. Maybe they'll be aggressive, move that up. But even if they stay at 30, there's some solid players there that could help this team win more games right away. Pick 13, Charlotte Hornets now at this spot. And for me with Charlotte, there's a few things to consider, but it's got to start on the defensive end. Defense, defense, defense. They need to get better there. If they hire Mike D'Antoni as their head coach, which is kind of what it seems like it's going to end up becoming. I am recording this a couple days ahead of time, by the way, so maybe we know who the head coach is by the time this comes out. If so, I've already dated the video. Whoops. But Charlotte needs to get better on the defensive side of the ball. That's been clear in the last two playing games for them, and it's been clear all regular season long for them. And why not take Jeremy Sochan, a guy who could become the best defensive player from this class potentially? When you look at what his physicals are, they're rather impressive. Kind of a Draymond Green type, where he's going to be a playmaker on offense and someone who on defense is also a playmaker. He's going to be in the right position, though, a lot of the time. And just like Draymond Green, I think he's got a really great defensive IQ and understanding of help side, but also where he needs to be in certain situations, such as when he's getting posted up. Scott Drew, you know, someone who coaches at Baylor, the head coach there, he knows what he's doing. He's won a national championship before, and there was a lot of times he relied on Jeremy Sochan as a freshman to match up with centers. And Sochan not only did well, most of the time he won those matchups. And Sochan's flexibility, versatility is a byproduct of his defensive IQ, understanding of positioning. You don't win matchups against centers unless you're an elite fronter and understand how to get to the fronting position. And he did it well. He also boxes out very well. Oh, and when he grabs a rebound, he can push in transition and hit a shooter out on the perimeter or take it coast to coast. Again, he's going to be a little bit of a development piece on the offensive side of the ball for sure. But defensively, Kid could become special, and I think Charlotte gets way better with this pick. Pick 14 now, moving on to the Cleveland Cavaliers here, and a team that's desperately in need of some wings. We'll see if a Colin Sexton sign and trade could potentially come to fruition this offseason that could bring in some wings. But ultimately, if they keep Sexton, they still have this pick to add some talent there. So it'll be interesting to see in which direction they go. But I could see Malachi Branham here, who's maybe more of a guard than a forward. But I could see him playing some three in the NBA because he's not the fastest player. He's not the most athletic when it comes to actual burst and quickness. So I think this could be a pretty good landing spot here for him. He shot fairly well from the field and from three as well this past season for Ohio State as a freshman. And if his shooting translates to the NBA, which I expect it to, he's a great fit next to Darius Garland and Karis LeVert and Colin Sexton, whether he's there or not, and Evan Mobley and Jared Allen, because he can stretch the floor for you. It's a massive upgrade over Isaac Okoro, who, yes, he's a growing shooter, but he still gets treated as a non-shooter. Teams are not afraid of helping off of him at all. They will dare him to beat you. Whereas for Malachi Branham, that's a different story. I've likened him in the past to Will Barton, not as athletic as a Barton, but I think kind of a similar player in terms of their impact, which is a good player. Getting that 14th overall, definitely a good outcome. Cleveland, I also considered Ochai Agbaji, but I landed on Branham here because of his youth. We get on to Charlotte here now, and at 15, the Hornets again at this spot. You could look center here, but I'm actually switching up my preference here in the mock for Charlotte this week. I'm looking at Ochai Agbaji out of Kansas. The fact that Cleveland did not take him in this mock opens up the potential of grabbing him. And you might be saying Sochan and Agbaji seems a little forward heavy here for a team that already has Miles Bridges, who's a free agent, by the way. Gordon Hayward, who's on the trade block, by the way. Kelly Oubre, who, I mean, it's Kelly Oubre. You know, like the wing position, yes, it's clustered right now, but it's possible that they have some real openings there as well. And remember, last year they took Kai Jones. They also took James Bouknight. So they could feel pretty good about their 2 and potential 5 down the road with those guys in the folds. We'll see, though, how confident they feel about their wings. I think draft night's going to be a huge turning point and pivot point for the Hornets, specifically in showcasing who they could maybe target in terms of free agency and who they might be afraid of losing, as well as a potential Gordon Hayward trade. Maybe they'll tip their hand to that as well with these draft picks. Pick 16, the Atlanta Hawks here now. And for Atlanta, I think this makes a lot of sense. I mocked it last week. I'm going to stick with it this week. Ousmane Dieng from the New Zealand Breakers. Someone who, again, I feel like I have to say it, a good pro day in front of a lot of executives definitely did help his draft stock a bit. And I think here with Dieng, the one thing you have to look at is his size, defensive flexibility. He's got a lot of the same characteristics as Dyson Daniels, but he's not nearly as hesitant as a shooter. Now, his shooting percentage isn't great. It's only a few ticks above Dyson Daniels, but the degree of difficulty was much higher. And I also think he's got a better handle to him. I think he puts a little bit more pressure on the rim with the ball in his hands. I do think he's a better prospect than Dyson Daniels myself. We'll see how that take ages. I'm sure a lot of you will agree, and I'm sure a lot of you will disagree. It's completely fine. Nothing wrong with that. It's just different ways we view players. And Ousmane Dieng here for me, though, going to Atlanta solves a backup point guard issue because I think he's going to be able to function that way. But he also solves a defensive size issue there in Atlanta. I think this is a multifaceted selection where you get a lot of different things that you need. If you're a Hawks fan, you should be very happy about this pick if it does go down on draft night. Moving into pick 17 now, we've got the Houston Rockets here. And for me with Houston, after already in this draft going with Paolo Banchero, there's a few different things we can look at here, but we need to get better defensively if you're a Rockets fan. That's why we're going with Tari Eason, a forward out of LSU. I know maybe it feels a little counterintuitive because we've already gone forward with Paolo Banchero. Take another forward here. I think a Christian Wood trade is more than likely. So you're going to have openings here where Tari Eason, I think, probably better off coming off the bench early in his career. You look at a starting lineup probably of Alperen Şengün, Paolo Banchero, Jayshawn Tate, Kevin Porter Jr., and Jalen Green fill out the guards. And then you bring Tari Eason off the bench with Josh Christopher. That sounds like a pretty good top 7 there. You probably need to make a few upgrades and additions at some point. But ultimately, Tari Eason, he's worthy of getting drafted here in the first round because of his long-term upside. He's a great athlete, really good physical profile. Now, what's the bugaboo on him? His skill set. He doesn't dribble the basketball very well, doesn't finish with his left hand very great. And bully ball is a great thing in college, tends to be less successful in the NBA, specifically when you're like a 6'8", 6'9" wing. Tends to not be as great unless you're one of the premier athletes in the world, like a LeBron James. But ultimately, Tari Eason, I think he's going to have a solid NBA career. He's starting to creep up my board a little bit the more and more I've watched him. I've spent tons of time watching him already, multiple hours. But at the end of the day, I went back to the film again. You pick up a couple things you didn't see the first, 4 or 5 times, and then you go from there. And I feel like he's climbing a bit on my board. Pretty good wingspan as well to him. So Houston definitely getting better on the defensive side of the ball with this pick. Chicago, the Bulls now at this spot. And this is like the dream outcome here for Chicago. A team that is desperately in need of a backup center. So bad that they were playing Tristan Thompson fairly significant minutes this year. And that's Walker Kessler out of Auburn. This is a great pickup for this Bulls team. They need a rim protector specifically for when Vucevic is not in the game. And I think Walker Kessler, 2-3 years from now, probably will be better than Nikola Vucevic. Vucevic at a point in his career where he's going to start regressing a little tiny bit each year. And I think Walker Kessler has immense room to grow, specifically offensively. Defensively, he's already really great in drop coverage. He's going to protect the rim. Everyone knows that. Offensively, the thing to watch for is his three-point shooting. Shot a low volume of threes at Auburn. Did not shoot them great, around 23% off the top of my head, if I remember that number correctly. But the goal here, and he has decent mechanics, is that he grows in confidence, he grows in volume, and he grows in consistency. And if he does that, he becomes a phenomenal pickup here at 18 with upside that maybe bigs like Jalen Duren and Mark Williams don't have. They haven't really showcased that as much. Duren and Williams, a few mid-range jump shots. That's really what they got to their name right now. Whereas Kessler, he stepped out behind the three-point line a little bit. If he keeps getting better there, this could be a really nice pickup for Chicago. 19, Minnesota, the team that is in the news. The other day, they hired Tim Connolly as their new president of basketball operations. And I can't speak enough about how big of a deal that is. That is a phenomenal hire for Minnesota. And it makes this pick really interesting to me because Tim Connolly has a great track record of drafting. And he's not like one of these out of the league GMs coming in and all of a sudden he has to make a decision. He was probably a part of scouting processes already for Denver. So he's already aware of these prospects. He already knows kind of what's out there. Now he just has to reshift his perspective to Minnesota. And how is he going to look at that? Which is an interesting question. For me, I see him going with Jaden Hardy. In the past, Tim Connolly and I have looked at prospects fairly similarly. Specifically last year, Nishan Highland, who he drafted out of VCU. I loved Bones Highland coming into the draft. I had him as a top 12 prospect on my big board. And I think he played into that fairly well. He had a really great rookie season. And I think there's a lot of room for Highland to grow as well. And I think Hardy kind of fits into that. A player who I think a lot of people are sleeping on, not fully sure on how good of a prospect this kid could be. And I think ultimately, when you look at his ability to get shots off the dribble for himself, and he's also grown a lot as a playmaker within the last 12 months. From where he was at in high school to what he showed by the end of the G League season was immense growth. In his first time playing against pro players, it did take him a few games to figure it out, but we started to see flashes and signs of that. I think he's going to be a much better player because of that experience. And I think Hardy becomes a very intriguing bench option early for Minnesota, and a player who ultimately, if D'Lo falls out of favor there in Minnesota, we could maybe see Jaden Hardy take some serious minutes going into maybe his second season in the league. Pick 20 now, the San Antonio Spurs here, and at this spot, San Antonio, after going with AJ Griffin at 9, they find themselves in a situation where EJ Liddell's available for them, which is a really great landing spot and opportunity because a player who I think is very solid and very consistent and can protect the rim for you. I think this answers a lot of their needs, even with Tari Eason off the board at this spot. AJ Griffin at 6'6" probably plays a little bit more of the 3 than the 4, which is fine because EJ Liddell is going to play a ton of the 4 and maybe even a little bit of small ball 5, which I think San Antonio would badly love to have. You know, Jakob Poeltl's been very good and very underrated for San Antonio for quite some time, but I think Liddell's shot blocking as a 6'7" forward gives you a different style of play that would really operate well around DeJounte Murray. Maybe AJ Griffin plays the 4 at 6'6", EJ Liddell at 6'7" with that rim protection element, plays the 5, you space the floor out more. You have Josh Primo, you give him more room to operate as a driver. You give DeJounte Murray more kickout opportunities. And I think San Antonio becomes vastly intriguing quickly because of their capabilities to not only just shoot the 3 ball, but defend very well with good rim protection, whether that's Liddell or Poeltl, and also intriguing defensive options as well in Devin Vassell, Keldon Johnson, DeJounte Murray out on the perimeter. They got a lot of different things that they can do. So San Antonio, I think, in a really good spot now if these are their 2 selections. 21, Denver, a team that I'm starting to worry about that brain drain. Not only did they lose Arturas Karnisovas to the Chicago Bulls, but now they also lost Tim Connolly to the Minnesota Timberwolves. So you have to ask yourself, is Denver going to start losing out on some of the things that made them great? You know, some of the decisions, because they are losing some of the people who have made those decisions. And now ultimately at 21, I see the Denver Nuggets going with Nikola Jovic, not Jokic, which obviously this is already a good start here. Nuggets fans can probably get behind this one because they're like, well, it's close enough. It has to be a good decision, right? And I think it is. Jovic is a very talented player, stands at about 6'10". He's got about a 6'11" wingspan, and he's skilled. He can shoot the 3 ball very well. He's not the greatest athlete, doesn't move his feet very well laterally, but we've seen Denver build around that in the past. You know, they weren't afraid of Michael Porter Jr. with back injuries with some of those issues. They're surely not going to be afraid of a healthy Nikola Jovic here in the 20s at this spot. I think it makes a lot of sense. Gives you another player who can probably play make for you a little bit and gives you different functionality to your offense that I think this team is badly in need of. We've seen in the playoffs, obviously, you know, no Jamal Murray. That's a problem. But once he's back, you get Jovic, Porter Jr. back. Bones Highland takes another step forward. Jokic keeps playing at an MVP level. This team can win a lot, specifically in the playoffs. 22, Memphis here at this spot. The Grizzlies, a team that had a great regular season run, fizzled out a little bit earlier than I think a lot of people were hoping for them. But ultimately, they're laying the building bricks down. They're setting up a pathway to dominance over the next 5 to 10 years. And Ja Morant's really the reason why. He's a phenomenal young player. And to help him out, let's get another guard there. Ty Washington. Tyus Jones headed toward unrestricted free agency. This isn't the sexy pick. This isn't the pick that makes everyone go, oh, we're winning a championship. But it's an important one. It's the one that solidifies your bench unit. And if you don't make a selection like this, everything gets quickly questionable. Backup point guard is one of the most important positions in all of basketball. It really honestly is. Without a good backup point guard, your second unit tends to die. And I think Ty Washington could be one of the better second or backup point guards in the league pretty quickly in his career, because I think he's someone who, like a lot of lead guards, can work in the pick and roll. It's going to be phenomenal here for Memphis. They're not going to have to change up their style too much. He's going to have a similar impact to Tyus. Not as much on the defensive end of the floor, but I think maybe can do a little bit more for you offensively. And I think ultimately here, Memphis stays relatively similar with the loss of Tyus and the addition of Ty Washington. 23, Brooklyn Nets here now. And for Brooklyn, there's a few different things to consider. Specifically, when you look at the defensive side of the ball, they need to get way better there. And Sean Marks has shown he can draft and identify talent. I think he found something in Cam Thomas last year. Kessler Edwards out of Pepperdine was a pretty good pickup. Day'Ron Sharpe in round 2 out of UNC. Again, another pretty solid selection. He might have been a round 1 selection, actually, now off the top of my head, excuse me. But Brooklyn here with 23, I'm looking at Ron Harper Jr. out of Rutgers, a player who I'm very high on myself. If he doesn't go in the first round, it's a travesty. He is a very nice basketball player on both ends of the floor. Played in the draft combine, and maybe wasn't the highest flyer or someone who made the most highlights, but watching the draft combine scrimmages, he was just in the right place a lot of the time. Played good, tough perimeter defense, has enough strength to bruise down low. And if you're Brooklyn, you look at the teams you have to beat, Miami, Boston, Milwaukee, you need to get stronger, you need to get more reliable on the wings, and you need to get bigger. And Ron Harper Jr. is all of those things. Plus, he comes from a cloth that has NBA pedigree. His dad won 5 championships in the NBA. I think that experience is going to help Ron Harper Jr. here, because as an older guy coming out of Rutgers, he knows what the NBA is like, and he knows what winning looks like. And I think he's going to be someone who helps Brooklyn get closer to that end goal. Now, it's possible we never see Brooklyn ever get there. And Nets fans, if that's the reality, I'm sorry, but it's possible. So you have to do everything you can to try and maximize it. Maybe they try and trade this pick, but Ron Harper Jr., if they keep it, is a really great pickup. Today's video is sponsored by MANSCAPED. Attention listeners, are you ready to be blown away? Well, you asked for it and they listened. Our friends at MANSCAPED just relaunched the Ultra Smooth package. It's back, baby. Your new favorite tool and complement to the Lawnmower 4.0 to keep your boy smooth while looking and feeling their best. The specialized groin shaving kit is here to help you buff, protect, and shave your most sensitive areas. It's time to crop that bush of yours and get right to the roots with a discount just for you from Manscaped. Get 20% off plus free shipping when you use code utility20 at manscaped.com. Again, use code utility20 at manscaped.com. We'll have a link to the website, in the bio. And looking at right now where you're at, it's time you treat yourself. You deserve it. After Mother's Day, gentlemen, it's time you treat yourself. After Mother's Day and treating the women in your life, it's now time to treat yourself, men. You deserve it. Pick up the Ultra Smooth package at manscaped.com and use code utility20 for 20% off plus free shipping. Now moving into 24, we got the Milwaukee Bucks, a team that Brooklyn's going to have to try and climb over, but it's going to be tough to do that, specifically here with what Milwaukee's capable of adding. And that's Kendall Brown, a lengthy forward of their own, and maybe not the biggest need here for Milwaukee. I think Milwaukee could really use a guard, but it's tough at this point. There's a few that I like, but it's also, I could see Milwaukee feeling, hey, we just didn't have Chris Middleton in that Celtics series. I think we're fine with our guards right now. We have Holiday and Middleton locked up. But what we would like to add is another wing defender who can maybe challenge Tatum, Brown, Jimmy Butler, Kevin Durant, those types of players. And Kendall Brown, he's got that capability, not right now, but maybe down the road. Because you look at a player who, yes, he's pretty raw. He struggles offensively, specifically in the half court when the game's slowing down. But when he's got an open floor ahead of him, he's pretty good. I think he can be a connecting piece offensively. And then you also look at Kendall Brown, and you have to say, he's got really great length, size, and athleticism. He jumped very well, posted a very good vertical. And then he also has a great wingspan differential. His wingspan is multiple inches bigger than his actual height, which is, again, a good sign for defensive capabilities, specifically once they coach him up a little bit. I do think he's pretty raw. The Minnesota-born prospect needs to get better, but I think Milwaukee's a great landing spot for him to improve a team that, yes, they have Brook Lopez right now, but again, I think that we might start seeing a little bit more Portis at the 5, specifically as Lopez ages a little bit, and adding a little bit more wing length with a smaller center makes a lot of sense. Pick 25, San Antonio again on the clock. Obviously, this team, 3 first-round picks, absolutely crazy to see San Antonio with this many selections. And I have them going with Ismael Kamagate. So the one thing that we were missing was a true center, right? We went with the 3 in AJ Griffin. We went with the 4 in EJ Liddell, who can maybe play some 5. And then we also now get the 5 here in Ismael Kamagate, who I just feel like is a perfect Greg Popovich player. Not only is he coming from an overseas team, as he played in Paris, France this past year, but he's also just a very high IQ defensive player who gets a ton of blocks at the rim. And if anyone knows anything about San Antonio, they know the backup center minutes were brutal this past year. You get Ismael Kamagate here, and you love the outcome. He's going to bring that rim protection element behind Pirtle. I wouldn't even mind them trading up from 25, maybe up to 21, right behind 20, just to ensure they get this kid, because I think he could be a really nice pickup for them. Now, offensively, it's not like he's going to be the best player. You're going to have to play him spot minutes early. But I think at 25, you find a contributor here, and that's a huge, huge find for San Antonio. 26, my Dallas Mavericks here now, and my 2 favorite selections for them in Ron Harper Jr. and Ismael Kamagate are now both off the board. And it's really tough for my Mavs. You know, we're at the point I'm recording this, 1 game away from potentially getting swept by the Golden State Warriors. You guys might know the outcome of that series already by the time you're watching this video. But ultimately here for my Mavs, they have some needs. They need another guard because Jalen Brunson's headed toward free agency. Very possible he gets maxed out by a team or a very rich contract that's not necessarily a max. They need another forward because Dorian Finney-Smith and Reggie Bullock have been run into the ground this postseason because they don't have another reliable 3-and-D wing. And they need a center. The center is really the biggest need, but with Ismael Kamagate off the board, it does make things a little bit more difficult. I opted for Hugo Bassan here. I went the guard route because I think Hugo Bassan's the best player available at this spot. And he actually was at a Dallas Mavericks game in person. Mark Cuban obviously knew about this. From my understanding, Hugo Bassan was at the game with an owner or a partial owner of the New Zealand Breakers. So maybe Dallas is courting Bassan a little bit here. Maybe that's against the rules. We're going to keep that on the down low, okay? But Hugo Bassan, 26 to Dallas. It fills a need. He's a good shooter as well. And I think he's actually a better playmaker than I'd even really accounted for. He lit up the G League or the NBA Combine, with some flashy flare passes, no looks behind the backs, and just played really timely basketball. Actually played pretty decent defensively. There were definitely ups and downs there, but that's a good sign for him that he at least played decent in those moments. And I think that Bassan here, a very solid pickup for Dallas at 26. 27, Miami Heat here now. And for Miami, there's a few things to consider. Obviously, this team's starting to get banged up in the Eastern Conference Finals. And that's been a very interesting series between them and Boston, just with how many blowouts we've seen already in that series. Ultimately here, though, I'm going with Jalen Williams out of Santa Clara. Everyone give this kid a round of applause. Here's his intro into my mock drafts. I probably should have had him in here earlier. He is an intriguing wing with solid size, solid playmaking capabilities, good athleticism. And I think he's starting to really lock up that first round pick potential where he could actually go legitimately in the first round. And a big reason why is his sophomore to junior campaign. We saw a massive jump from behind the three-point line, jumped up to 39% from three, which is huge. Had that number stayed where it was, we're talking about a kid who would probably get drafted late second round at best. But the fact that he took that huge step forward, had a great NBA combine with a ferocious dunk in transition, he caught the eyes of evaluators. When they pull up his numbers, when they pull up his film, everything's going to check out. I think he goes in the first round now. And I think Miami would love the opportunity to select a kid like Jalen Williams. 28, Golden State Warriors are now the team that's kind of cursing my Dallas Mavericks, but I can't really hate on them. Golden State's an awesome team. They've got awesome chemistry. Steve Kerr's motion offense, I'm not sure if it would work super well with any other stars not named Steph Curry and Klay Thompson and Draymond Green, but his offense is perfect for who he's got, and you have to credit him with that. And with where they're currently at here now, it's hard to really find a need. I opted for Kennedy Chandler because I think ultimately if you're Golden State, Gary Payton II is an unrestricted free agent, and he's been awesome for them this year. So maybe, just maybe, they look for a guard who can defend other guards. Now, I don't think this is a huge need for them, but I don't think they have a lot of huge needs in general. Kevon Looney is also headed toward free agency, but we've also really thinned out the center position so far in this mock. So for me, I think they look at Kennedy Chandler here simply because he's a former FIBA U19 World Cup gold medalist, played a good impact on that team. Also had a pretty good freshman season for Tennessee, has a really good wingspan at over 6'5", despite not prototypical size for the position. Quick feet, smart defensive player. Oh, and by the way, he can get downhill frequently, which is going to be awesome for kicking out to shooters like Otto Porter Jr. if he sticks around, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Jordan Poole, Moses Moody down the road. I mean, this Golden State team's loaded. Okay, Kennedy Chandler just makes the rich even richer. 29, Memphis Grizzlies here now. And for me, Memphis, after already going with Ty Washington, they're at a spot here where they can take Trevor Keels, who becomes the eventual replacement for Dylan Brooks. Very similar physical type, big, strong, burly players who can defend multiple positions. I did list him as a loser at the NBA draft combine because he measured in around 6'4.5" with shoes on, which is a negative for me, specifically when I was kind of evaluating this player as a 3 because he was listed about 6'6". Definitely is a little bit of a loss for him when it comes to his stock, but ultimately he did not compete in combine scrimmages, which makes me think that maybe some team expressed some serious interest in round 1. Memphis would be one of the teams that makes a lot of sense to me, given the fact that Kyle Anderson's also headed toward free agency. I think Zaire Williams is their starting small forward down the road, but I think you could see someone like Keels fitting in long-term into this roster. And then 30, the final pick here of the first round, Oklahoma City Thunder on the clock. If you guys have enjoyed the mock up to this point and you haven't already, smash the like button, subscribe to the channel. And for me with Oklahoma City here, after already grabbing 2 really good players in Jabari Smith and Mark Williams, we're going to take Christian Koloko. We're going to take a depth big here, fit him in behind Mark Williams. And the reason why, Oklahoma City needs it. Yes, Derek Favors picked up his player option. Ultimately, that shouldn't factor into any of your long-term plans. And I think Oklahoma City badly needs center help that bad that they could really take 2 in the first round. Last year, they doubled down on guard. They took Trey Mann and Josh Giddey. You could look at them this year and say, why not do it at center? You really address your front court this year. You get way better. And who knows, maybe the ping pong balls can still bless you next year and maybe end up with Victor Wembanyama and you reconstruct your roster from there. Ultimately, though, Koloko, decent pickup here. I don't necessarily have a first round grade on him myself, but I know others do. And I think that ultimately Presti would arguably consider him here at this spot. The running mate to Benedict Mathurin lands in OKC. Thank you all so much for watching. Again, I hope you did enjoy. If you did, make sure to subscribe, like, and comment on today's video. Share your thoughts with me. Let me know what other videos you'd like to see on the channel. And again, thanks so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the content, and we'll catch you in the very next utility sports video.